There's a new way for women to help themselves in their own communities, and you're really going to be interested in how it's done. Jamie Bechtel from a new course right here tonight on Rainmakers. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you.
First off, did I pronounce your name right?
Yes.
It is Bechtel. So a new course, your organization that you founded, what's different about it? There's lots of organizations out there that help women in their communities.
There are a lot of organizations that help women in their communities. Most of those organizations approach women from a development standpoint, from an economic standpoint. 70% of the world's poor are women, and 60% of the world's poor rely on natural resources for survival. That means for food, water, energy, medicine. So that link between survival, natural resources, and women is often overlooked. And we thought that an organization, the data showed that an organization that closed that gap in knowledge, awareness, would be an effective way to make change happen in the world.
Well, I'm reading here from your website, and it says this: we work internationally with partners in the U.S. and around the globe to conserve and restore natural resources through the empowerment of women.
Would you like that in English?
Yeah.
We're a small organization, and for us to go out and become an implementing organization, go out and drill wells in Africa, plant new seeds, would be an incredibly cost-heavy, non-additive way to build an organization. But we knew that if we could go out and take the hundreds of organizations that are already working around the world and get them to include women as part of their strategy, particularly environmental organizations, we could influence the way billions and billions of dollars per year are spent. So we estimate if we can influence the 60 organizations that are on our grid, we will be influencing upwards of $2 billion a year. And so that is a way that we could have the biggest bang for our donors' buck, effectively.
We here at Rainmakers interview a lot of people working in around the globe, and oftentimes it's about this woman right here, or the millions, probably billions, just like her. I don't think of conserving natural resources or of the environment when I think of empowerment. Should I be?
Absolutely. So let me give you an example that was just in the news from Zambia. Women had access to fish for the first time. Now, true, that access came in part because of climate change, so the flow through rivers has been decreased. So women are able to safely go out and fish for the first time in their community's history. They catch those fish, and they take the money and they build small businesses, and then they take the returns from those small businesses and they send their kids to school. So within the space of a year, they've gone from being poor women with few alternatives to economically empowered women who are able to educate future generations of their community members. And that's all because of a few fish. And the women know immediately that they need that access to those fish to exist in perpetuity, because that is the natural resource that is available to them to make the difference in their lives. And we see that again and again and again around the world. And as the problem with conservation and the approach to conservation has been the presumption that women don't want to manage their natural resources. They absolutely do. They, more than any other being on this planet, than us as wealthy people from developing countries or as from other members of their communities, because their reliance is so intense on natural resources, they absolutely know that it's critical to their long-term survival. But a lot of times they're not, again, using the buzzword, they're not empowered to manage the resource. They've got other things on their mind. They've got HIV crisis to deal with. They've got education crisis for their children to deal with, and for themselves, their literacy rate is often the lowest in their communities. And so they are not able to prioritize the environment, even though they know that it is one of the things that they need to do. So what we're hoping to do is not only engage women in conservation strategies, but to make sure they have the base, the things that they need to exist day to day, so that they can choose to maybe walk a little further outside of a protected area to get firewood, or to walk and manage their water resources a little differently that might be a little bit more time consumptive, but they have their other needs met.
Do women currently in the developing countries, which I call impact countries, do they have a role in making the strategic decisions over conservation?
They don't, outside of their day-to-day decision making. So meaning they wake up and they're able to go to the fields and make a certain decision about what they're going to plant. But as the conservation community has come in and taken steps to preserve natural resources, women are not systematically engaged in that process. So let me put it in very, very pure terms, and I'll use myself as an example. As a conservation person coming in from the United States, I would go into a village. I would meet with the village elders to discuss what areas might be most beneficial for conversation. So
yeah, those village elders are men, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so we hatch a plan, and the village elders, who are men, say, yeah, this area is really great. We should set up this as a protected area. Well, that may be and is often the area that women use. And so their resources are taken away. There are places in South Africa, for example, where their protected areas, something like 83% of the use by women is done illegally because they have no alternatives. Their resource use wasn't taken into account. Now, alternatively, the examples and the data that we have when women are systematically engaged, you get a tremendous return on your investment. So there's some amazing research in India. India has a decentralized management strategy for its forests, which means that the forests are managed by local advisory boards. And those local advisory boards, if you put 3 or more women on that local advisory board, your forest cover goes up astronomically.
Really?
In some cases, as much as by 75%. And the reason is because women and their relationship with natural resources are able to understand that the long-term protection of these resources is important. And they're willing to make stricter rules. They're willing to enforce those rules so long as they're engaged in the process. And it's not very different from the women that we know here in this country, right? If you show up on my back door and tell me, here's what you should do, there's pretty good odd I'm not going to do it.
You know, I'm going to go away from my notes right now because I have to ask this question. I again, here at Rainmakers, interview an awful lot of people, and time after time after time, I find that there's a completely different approach to just about everything by women, regardless of the country. Why is that? What is it about men that make them smoke, drink, carouse up whatever little money that they have instead of investing it in their children?
You know, I don't know why. I think part of it has to, I think part of it does stem from the relationship with women to their children and to their communities. I do know that there are some amazing men out there who have provided leadership at the community level, at the national level, at the international level. And men have to be included in this process. They have to recognize that investing in women is an investment in the same values and same goals that they have. And so I think what we've been really excited about is to go into this as an inclusive process and really finding the best in everyone, bringing that to bear on the solution and seeing what happens. Mm-hmm.
We're talking with Jamie Bechtel of a new course. Be sure to go to the website at newcourse.org. We're going to have it up during the show several times. Very, very interesting. It goes right to the core issue of essentially development in communities, because it's also about conservation and how women are playing not only a role, but now are playing a role in the strategic decisions around their own conservation. Jamie, why are you qualified to do this?
I may not be. I often joke that I am one of the world's foremost sea urchin experts. That's my background. I went into my career choices with the intent to make the biggest difference in the world that I could. And so I think I've approached conservation, I've approached gender from a very mind open. I don't have an agenda. I don't have a hypothesis. The sum total of my knowledge, of my experience, says that women are key players and can be key players, should be key players in conservation. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to prove anything to anybody. This is not my pride on the line. And I think that openness has served New Course well, and I think it has serve the crafting of our business model well. And if I'm wrong, I would walk away from this today gladly and do something that makes me a lot more money, gives me more vacation time, lets me sleep at night. So the data, the experience, I've worked in over 25 countries all over the world.
A lot of it for Conservation International?
Yes, a lot of it for Conservation International. Everything points to the fact that women are an important piece of this puzzle that have not been included. But if we're wrong, we're wrong, and we're open to hearing from that. No one has been able to send us the slightest bit of data to suggest that this is a boondoggle.
Well, actually, you've had quite an impact. Let's talk about some of the places where you have had an impact. You're working now in how many different countries?
We're working in 2 on the ground, and we expect that to rapidly expand in the next few months.
So Tanzania is one of them,
Tanzania
right?
is one of them.
But I got to ask you this, on the website, and it's just because I have this curiosity about what things are. I'd never heard of bushmeat before. But bushmeat is something that you say this, we work across many different fields with many partners to bring about community-driven development and resource conservation. A few of the areas we're working in and plan to work in soon are basic education, healthcare, fisheries, forestry, and bushmeat. That would kind of jumped out at me. What is bushmeat?
So bushmeat is effectively hunting. So it happens all over the world. It happens here. People go out into the woods and they hunt what they can find, and then they bring it home and they eat it. The difference is in many places like Africa and Indonesia, along with armadillos and anteaters, you often find primates and
apes,
monkeys. And the images are gruesome.
Yeah.
And in fact, it goes beyond gruesome images. Of course, as you likely know, HIV is derived from bushmeat consumption. And we now know that that jump from the consumption of primates to humans didn't happen once, it happened as many as 7 times. So people go off into the woods, they're hunting, they get scratched, they get bitten, they're preparing the meat, they get blood on their hands, and they get diseases from that bushmeat. And in the case of HIV, that disease spread all around the world. So it is a means of survival. We are now working in the Congo with African Wildlife Foundation, which is a phenomenal organization. They do brilliant work, and a foundation called Arcus Foundation that's focused on the conservation of primates. And what we now know is a lot of conservation efforts have focused on and attempted to prevent the trade in bushmeat by setting up protected areas and keeping people out of, stopping them from hunting in protected areas. But bushmeat is a primary source of protein for many of these people. They don't have alternatives. It turns out in many places women manage the markets. So they'll say to their husband, go get me some bushmeat that I either need to prepare for dinner or sell at the market this weekend. If women have alternative protein sources, if they have chicken, if they have fish, they don't want to eat bushmeat. Who wants to eat a primate when you've got alternatives? So we're working with African Wildlife Foundation to figure out the best way to help women find alternatives to feed their families.
So the other country that you work in now is
Tanzania.
So Tanzania and
The Congo.
or in the Congo.
Yep.
So frankly, 2 of the poorest places on the planet.
Yep.
But conservation is important to the leaders of that country?
Absolutely.
How come?
Well, they recognize that people in their countries are eating and drinking water and finding medicine from and deriving economic opportunities from natural resources. Globally, the natural resource base provides many of our economic opportunities, from paper to, what have you. So, but in the absence of alternatives, that's what's available for the people of these countries. So we work a lot at the leadership level. In fact, we're just heading to Liberia to work with 6 different partners and the President Sirleaf, and to help understand how we can get the natural resource base to feed and provide energy for and safe water, drinking water for many more people.
I bet those are interesting conversations that you have with the leaders, and you're talking with them about conservation and how it positively impacts their economy when the problems that so many entities have brought forth relate to health and nutrition and you name it. Without going too far, without getting into anything secret, can you tell me about some of those conversations that you have with the leaders?
Absolutely. They understand that Well, several things. One is that a lot of the development and aid work by default goes into urban centers. And there's a lot of attention. If you want to give the most women preventative health care for the cheapest amount possible, it goes to urban centers. And that leaves rural communities high and dry. And many of these, and with many of the people that you're talking to, from microfinance to water to whatever, it leaves rural communities with few options and few interventions. And governments know this, and they're trying to figure out how to crack that code. How do we get rural people the resources that they need so that they can pay for sustainable alternatives? And what leader after leader has seen is as the rain patterns change, as the crops stop growing, they have more and more people going hungry. So interestingly, I think a lot of the times it's easier to talk to leaders of developing countries about their natural resource base and what it means for their people than it is here in this country, because here it's really largely viewed as a luxury as opposed to a priority. So this is really about food security, water security, energy security, and health security, and less about luxury.
Wow. And so do women, are they starting to have a place at the table now?
We are having some impact in some places. We have a lot more work to do. There's benefit by increasing number of women in leadership positions. There's more and more ministers of environment that are women. There's new presidents that are women. Just because you have women at the table doesn't necessarily mean that women's views are going to be represented. But it does help. So as we're seeing improvements in governance and more diversity in governance, we're seeing more balanced conversations, but there's still a lot of work to be done. I think new course is going to be productive for a while.
Some of the challenges that you list on the website as well, like absence of land tenure rights. There are a lot of organizations that are working in land ownership, particularly for women in developing countries. Is that something that women say to you, yes, I work this land, I farm this land, I get food from it, I take care of my kids from it, but I can't own it?
Yep.
Do they say that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in very basic terms, I mean, think about it. If you're renting a property here, you're not going to put a tree on it that's going to take 20 years to bear fruit. And that tree may help prevent soil degradation, and it may provide shade so that water doesn't evaporate as quickly. But it does not make sense for you to make that long-term investment if you don't own the property and if your children won't inherit that property. What's happening in a lot of places is increasingly households are headed by females. So you have men who are migrating out to cities. You have men that are going to war. War also, of course, linked to the degradation of natural resources. And as more and more women are holding that land in short terms, they recognize that they can't get the optimal benefits without owning it. So, yeah, it's a big issue.
What you're talking about is significant cultural change, though. If women are empowered where they've never been empowered before, if women have the economic stability where they've never had it before, if they've had the ability to help their children become educated, something that they've not had before, that's a big, huge cultural change. Are you right in the middle of a cultural war?
No. We work in many different places. We have worked in many different places. Each place has a unique culture. And we approach each place with respect to its cultural integrity. So you'll hear me sit here on an interview that will be largely viewed by this audience and speak very candidly about gender. And we're no less candid in the field, but we're respectful of the terms and conditions of the community. So for example, in Tanzania, we met with the leaders of the community, mostly men, many times before they felt comfortable with us talking to the women. And we were happy to do that. We funded a project recently where 100 people were going to be trained in alternative agriculture techniques. 60 of them were women, 40 of them were men. We have no problem funding men. And if they feel like they're getting the wrong end of the deal, they're just going to become angry and it's going to become problematic. So we always work within the cultural norms of the societies. Oftentimes we know that once women return economic stability to the community, their position automatically rises in the community. So there's a lot less tension once there's return, either economic or otherwise.
Wow, and in business here in the United States, a lot we talk about price sensitivity. It sounds like we're talking about the same thing there. It's just the price is the price of rising stature inside your own community.
It absolutely, our lives are not at all dissimilar from their lives. It's just a different economic bracket. We all care about the same things. We all want the same things. You know, one of my favorite studies, and frankly, I don't know what to do with this in my own work, is some work out of the MIT Poverty Lab. And they did a bunch of research that showed when you give the poorest of the poor alternatives, when they have enough money to buy a little more, they don't go out necessarily and buy protein that's going to last them all year. They go out and have one amazing meal. They just splurge. And, you know, that's exactly what I do when I get a bonus paycheck, you know. So I think we have to be very careful not to pass judgment on the decisions that communities make, but recognize that we're very similar and we're all humans and we all want, you know, a fabulous wedding for our daughters, and we all want our kids to be healthy, and sometimes we want to take our kids out of vacation to go, you know, out of school to go on vacation. So we're not dissimilar.
I'll bet you've met some really interesting people over there, haven't you?
I have.
Tell us about some of them.
You know, my first trip into the field as a gender expert was to Tanzania, and that was absolutely rewarding. I mean, these women, I don't know what I expected. I think I expected to be a little bit different, and to connect with them, to have them welcome me into their homes, you know, as woman to woman was a fabulous experience. And there was one woman, Dodo, that I was particularly drawn to. You go into these, you know, it all sounds glamorous. You go to Tanzania, rural Tanzania, and one of the most important biodiversity areas in the world, a hotspot for biodiversity. But actually, you're in huts all day, you know, hot schools with chickens running around your feet. And you're in long meetings, and there's no water breaks, and there's no food breaks, and there's no bathroom breaks. You're just there for 8 hours in these meetings with people. And there was one woman, and she just had a spark in her eye. And I had caught her eye all through the meeting. She was very attentive. Well, it turns out her husband had long been an advocate of conservation, and he really believed that protection of the environment was crucial to the long-term sustainability of his family, and that those resources needed to be what his children had. That's what they were going to rely on for surviving. Her husband, Ramadan, had diabetes, which is very prevalent throughout the eastern arc of Tanzania, in part because of genetics and in part because of diet. So he had diabetes that was left untreated, and he's gone blind. So now Dodo is raising 4 children effectively on her own. Her oldest daughter is in secondary school, which only approximately 5% of the kids go on to secondary school.
Wow.
So the fact that it's a girl going to secondary school, you know, even lower statistics. And she walks many kilometers a day, about 5 kilometers each way, I think is the distance to do this. And so Dodo has now taken over the role of leadership in her family and is putting her daughter through school and making it happen. She's got 2 little boys, and she's just the leader of this group. And the thing that I love about these women is they're not victims. You know, they are proud women. They're happy women. You go into these meetings and they're eager and they're vibrant and they're passionate and they're proud and they're inspirational. And you just, you know, you stand there and you realize that in some ways I was in awe of them. I mean, how can you not be bitter? How can you not be angry?
Yeah, that's my question. How can they not be?
It is their life, and you've got an option. I think we all have an option, and they are not unlike us. So you can wake up every morning and be mad about your circumstance, or you can make the best of it, and they do. And it's a constant inspiration and an honor to work with them.
Well, someone from your group, Colleen, has provided some fantastic pictures, and they're very colorful dress. And there's this picture of women who, you said proud women. There's pride on all of these faces. What is it that you think makes them the most proud of the work that they're doing in conservation that they didn't do before?
I think that they can see beyond today beyond tomorrow, they can see a future for their kids and they're willing to work for that. And I think they're proud to be able to do that, to be willing to do that. And to really focus on, the hope, the integrity that tomorrow allows.
You've got a picture of a girl holding up 2 plants. Is that something that, I mean, when I think of, and this is from Kenya, when I think of Kenya, I think of green and lush and, plants growing all over the place. Why would they need to be worrying about planting things?
Well, deforestation is a problem throughout this region. And in fact, in the eastern Usambara Mountains, most of the land has been cleared for coffee and tea plantations back through the 1900s. And a lot of deforestation for wood, burning cook stoves, making, food, keeping people warm. So deforestation is a tremendous problem throughout all of the areas that we work. We only work in ecologically vulnerable areas. And so replanting trees is a very important part of looking toward the future. So we work with, right now, 2 groups that have focused on teaching people how to replant trees. The Tanzanian Forest Conservation Group in Tanzania, and we're getting ready for a big project with the Greenbelt Movement, which is, of course, a huge honor for us to work with Wangari Maathai's Institute, and to look at how do we take tree planting and turn that not only into a bigger project, but also giving women the other skills that they need.
But if you're going to plant a tree, you're going to believe that you're part of the future and that you're part of the leadership of the community, right?
Yep.
And women are getting to that place.
They are.
Well, congratulations on that so
Thank
very
you.
much. I mean, we have so many cool pictures. Another one, though, is about cook stoves. And, and I think to myself, okay, so how do cook stoves and conservation work, and how does it work together?
Well, cook stoves are a very important part of women's lives. There's a lot of effort been done on cook stoves. And we are not a cook stove organization. We really look across the world of women, their roles, what they need, and cook stoves are often a tool that they need. And so cook stoves allow wood to be used, about a 50% reduction in wood, depending upon what model you're using, the one that we're working with in Tanzania.
Yeah, I know that the UN has a big
and
cook
we're
stove
part
project.
of the, we are actually part of that Cook Stove Alliance, and advising that Cook Stove Alliance. But one of the things that I'd like to point out that's really important is, okay, maybe you get women to successfully adopt cook stoves. And the draw is that it reduces indoor air pollution, so you get a health outcome. It decreases the amount of wood that's needed, so you get a conservation outcome. You get women that are able to, if the cook stove works properly, they have more time, so they don't have to spend as much time cooking. You get all these outcomes. But when you implement a cook stove, it reduces the ambient light allowed in the hut. So you have much less light, so women have to choose a lantern.
And hopefully it's not kerosene.
And that's exactly it. We don't think about that when we're on a Cook Stove Alliance or when we're working on a cook stove project. If they choose the wrong lantern, it actually causes the indoor air pollution to rise. And so how do we look at these holistically?
We only have 10 seconds left. I got to ask you one question. Are you having fun?
I love it.
Jamie Bechtel, a new course. We'll see you right here next time on Rainmakers TV. Take care.